So I'm here today representing New Deal Studios, a production company with 20 years of experience creating content including photographic effects, additional photography for features, commercials, television, print ads, live events, and more. As we've evolved over the years, we're focusing on developing and creating our own IP. To this end, we've produced 2 independent feature films, and we're pioneering the VR revolution with 3 live-action VR short films. Now, I'm an unlikely participant in this revolution. I haven't spent my career dreaming of immersive virtual worlds. I'm not a gamer. I'm not an evangelist for the latest technology. In fact, I'm a bit partial to traditional techniques. I like film, and I still have a flip phone. But back in May, thanks to the enthusiasm of some inspired, creative, forward-thinking people who happen to be my friends and coworkers, I was asked to help create 1 and then eventually 3 different live-action, 360-degree stereo virtual reality narratives. And because I run a production company that specializes in complex live-action photography, I have the resources and contacts to take up that challenge. So, live-action 360-degree virtual reality narratives. It's worth breaking that down a little more specifically. Firstly, 360-degree virtual reality. That is to say, you watch these projects using a headset with visuals and audio that allows you to experience the sensory phenomenon of being physically in a space where you can turn your head in almost any direction without breaking the illusion of place. Live action. That is to say, we're not creating computer-generated worlds. That fact alone separates these projects from almost all the content in the current VR space. And thirdly, these are narratives. That is to say, stories. We're not presenting an experience. As cool as it is to stand at the Grand Canyon or a rock concert and be able to look around, what our creative teams attempted in each of these projects was to use this technology to tell a story. So the first project, Black Mass, this was directed by Greg Plotkin and produced with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts and Jaunt. And we're exploring the horror genre. Creepy things are happening in a creepy place, and they're happening to you. We shot the piece over 2 days using the warehouse stage space at New Deal Studios. We were initially a little conservative with the camera since it was our first time out. With one dramatic exception, we kept the camera locked, and we staged stunts and actor entrances and exits by building hiding places into the sets. So our director was able to conceal himself and view the performances. In addition to the usual difficulties of working with young children, stunts and makeup effects, we had the added difficulty that there wasn't really any safe place to put, for example, pads on the ground or tubes to run blood gags, or the AD staff to cue entrances and exits. And also, since the lighting would be visible in the scene, all the units we used had to be practical lights. And since the takes are relatively long and we didn't have any traditional cutting, we had to do a lot of rehearsal. So the experience was almost like staging a play in the round. We ran the positions and lines until Greg Plotkin felt the performance was where it needed to be, and then everyone hid, and we shot it. So here's a little behind the scenes from our rehearsal.
Jane says, "Oh God, it's way worse than I ever thought." Jane gets pulled away, the door slams, monks come in. Try to dance a little bit, because I can sing. They saw me, they saw me. They know my name. They know my name. They just try to go forward. They want. Alright, Violet, rolling. Alright, camera check for an actual, that's
And the shot. So Black Mass puts the viewer right in the story. A hood is removed from your head, a young traumatized woman asks if you can speak or move, and when she sees you can't, she goes for help. It's a perfect scenario for VR, evolving as it does from what gamers are accustomed to seeing as first-person shooters. This is where you're a character in the action. Now for our second project with Jaunt, The Mission, directed by Matthew Gratzner, we decided to push things a little further. Our genre this time was action-adventure, a simple story about a secret mission to the Eastern Front in World War II, where some American paratroopers must enlist a group of Russians to rescue a captured soldier from the Germans. In pre-production, Matthew Gratzner ran some tests with the Jaunt camera, And from the results, he made two important conclusions. One, you can move the camera. Two, you can use a perspective that isn't necessarily a point of view. So based on this second conclusion, Matthew rewrote his script, and instead of putting the viewer in the narrative as a character, Matthew chose to tell the story more cinematically, with the camera as a privileged viewing position within the story. In the telling of the mission, the camera moves in and out of POV between different characters, but most often, it's simply an observer to the scenes as they unfold. Shooting a period film always includes challenges, and you have to avoid seeing contemporary anomalies, satellite dishes, roof antennas, contemporary cars. But now with VR, we had to avoid these things in 360 degrees. So we solved the problem of lighting largely by telling our story in daylight, though we did have some interior scenes and those took some special considerations. But the rest of the production required a very special location with very few anachronistic obstructions, and my co-producer Vicky DeMay found precisely such a property in Northern California near Petaluma on land belonging to an amateur World War II historian. The location not only offered great vistas without a contemporary structure in view, but also provided a trove of World War II vehicles, costumes, and large artillery for use as wardrobe and set dressing. Now, acquiring our sound dialogue it proved a bit more challenging than in the Black Mass shoot. For that project, we could hide wireless microphones on the actors, and that, with the ambisonic microphone on the camera, gave us pretty good source sound. Now, with the mission, we were often in the middle of an open field with occasionally loud gunfire and tank engine noise, and nowhere to hide our sound technician. I had hoped that we might be able to put our sound guy, who was going to be a local hire from Petaluma, in a soldier's outfit and hide him and his kit in the scene. But when the guy showed up, he was my height, he had frizzy hair to here, unmistakably contemporary. And I jokingly suggested that we put berries in his hair and hide him as a bush. We ended up placing him behind vehicles and trees, and in one case, an actual camouflage duck blind. So it did work out, but it was a challenge. Our other innovation, based on the test results, was that this time we decided to move the camera. Now, to do that without making the viewer sick, we had to create rigs that could maintain camera position without introducing pan or tilt or roll. So Matthew Gratzner designed and constructed 3 custom camera rigs. The first is a modified consumer Steadicam mount, and we used a camera operator of smaller stature to get a lens height of roughly eye level. And the second camera we made was a positionable tilt plate mount with a descender that allowed our camera to drop into a scene from a parachute. And finally, we made a harness rig that allowed the camera operator to ride on the back of a moving tank. So at times we were shooting within the thresholds of focus and composition that the current build of the Jaunt camera could achieve. But we wanted to push the limits of the technology and see what was possible. And what we learned is you can do a lot. Our minds are so accustomed to consuming visual content in a cinematic way, with cuts that jump from scene to scene and shifting POVs, that in a VR world, those conventions still work. Those discoveries that you could tell a story without having to make the camera a player in the story, and that you could advance the story through conventional editorial methods like cuts, were a pleasant surprise, and they allowed Matt to tell the story he wanted to without much compromise. So you can take a look at some of our behind the scenes from our 2-day shoot in Petaluma.
Martinez, who's Papadopoulos?
I didn't see him, sir.
Must have come down over there. Okay, settle please. Let it settle. You good, Ian?
Yes.
So here we go. And action!
I got the A5.
One more, that's good.
Okay, let's cut there.
Oh, you might recognize that AD's voice. So for our third film, Kaiju Fury, directed by Ian Hunter, we decided to apply the techniques of miniature effects photography to live action narrative 360-degree stereo virtual reality. In Kaiju Fury, an experimental power station in a small urban area summons giant mutant creatures that absorb its concentrated energy. Meanwhile, the team who created the power station raced to destroy it before the creatures destroyed everything. Fun. Again, collaborating with the Stan Winston School of Character Arts and Jaunt, first we had to create our miniature resources, a miniature city in 1/24th scale and 2 human-operated creature suits. The city was conceived and created by Ian Hunter and New Deal Studios as part of a live tutorial on miniature fabrication taught through the Stan Winston School. The school also led a contest for the designs of the protagonist mutant kaiju creatures in association with Russell Brown of Adobe. So the designs were then executed as creature suits, and then the fabrication of the creature suits was also made as a live tutorial for the Stan Winston School, and that was led by veteran creature effects fabricators Billy Bryan, who is well known as the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man, and also Ted Haynes. And the creatures made their debut at Russell Brown's Adobe Max conference. Once we had our city and creatures, we worked to find camera positions within the city that made sense, both in terms of our narrative and in terms of the best use of the technology. Buildings were used to hide lighting sources. We stretched black velvet across the ceiling of our stage to create a night sky, and we used atmospheric smoke to allow the distant views on our cityscape to fall off to haze. We had 2 days to shoot the monster and city shots, and here rehearsals became even more important, not just for establishing performance blocking, but also for being able to cue pyrotechnics from positions unseen by the 360-degree camera. You can see some of our rehearsals and photography in the next little behind-the-scenes film.
It goes through the wall or through the road. Action! Back here! Brian Turner! This hit Brian! And Pete Stark! Pete Stark! Big flash! Lights out! And especially Brian can't see, and Vince was on fire, so that was really pretty cool.
So, giving context to the creature sequences, we also choreographed and shot a day of additional scenes with live actors on full-scale sets. Then we got to our post-production process. Now that's been as much of an education as the production itself. On Black Mass, it took Greg Plotkin a few attempts just to understand how to work with the files we were getting from the Jaunt camera. Matthew Gratzner developed the post-process even further using different cutting techniques and implementing visual effects. New Deal Studios digital supervisor Jeff Jasper, working with Jaunt, developed a pipeline to deal with editorial and effects and figured out a way to do the compositing and paint out in 3D elements that the directors wanted for their stories. Now, Ian Hunter's upcoming challenges on Kaiju Fury include putting the POV inside a fighter plane cockpit, and we still have a few effects on each of the projects that we're not entirely sure how we're going to achieve, but we're confident that we can ultimately achieve them. So, why take these risks? Why push the technology? To what end? There are currently no VR theaters, no VR distribution system, and no revenue streams from VR content. Right now, at this moment, the only way to see this content is to stand in line at an event or trade show or professional panel discussion and take your turn on the Oculus Rift headset or one of the prototype mobile app viewers like we have here in the lobby. But when you do, and if you haven't done it, I urge you to do it. As soon as you experience the full immersion of VR, you'll understand why people get so excited about this content delivery system. It's an incomparable feeling to be instantly transported to another world. Of course the gamers get it, and they like it, and they'll use it a lot. But what's exciting for me and New Deal Studios is the possibility that the technology opens up for more immersive storytelling. Jaunt's VR player will launch by the end of the year. And we know that in the very near future, apps to show this content will be downloadable for your mobile device. Whether you're a gamer with an Oculus Rift that you paid top dollar for, or a curious hobbyist with a $25 cardboard viewer that fits your phone, you are going to want to experience content in a virtual space. And the filmmakers I've been working with get inspired working in this format. And the viewers who see the content are constantly surprised, excited, astounded, literally moved by the experience. I've seen the material, and I've personally had that transported and amazed experience. I may have started the collaboration reluctantly, but I've become convinced of the power afforded by this new way, and it is a new way, of delivering content. I know firsthand there's a market for VR, and I think there will be in the very near future a marketplace to download VR content. And while much of it might be computer generated, I've no doubt that some of it will be photographed live, and I'm proud to have helped create some of the first such VR content. So come see the future at our table out there and visit our website for articles and future events, or contact New Deal Studios to get a tour. Thanks to the PGA and the BES for having me here.
Give us some background on the collaboration between you and John. Why were you shooting these films in the first place?
Again, it's relationships that have been maintained sort of over the years, but the gentleman, Scott Brooke, who's the creative director of Jaunt, is friends with one of the partners of the Stan Winston School. I produce content for the Stan Winston School, and so Jaunt came to the Stan Winston School with the Black Mass Project. We got Greg Plotkin involved. He's the director of the latest Paranormal Activity movie, and it became an opportunity for a bunch of people who had interest in VR to actually get their hands dirty with a camera. That was it.
Okay, and talk a bit about live action versus CG. What is sort of the unique,
Well, it's
challenge?
The main challenge is that you get to. Well, the benefit is that it's actually there. So a lot of work goes into creating digital characters. You were talking about, some of the other presenters were talking about how to create something that feels physically there. You have to look at it from different sides, and the rendering gets kind of intense. And when you are using photography, it's already there. So the benefit of that immediacy is kind of instant.
Okay. In our first two demos, we saw hacked cameras basically do the job, but here you use the Jaunt.
Right, and the Jaunt camera, as one of the other presenters pointed out, it is not perfect. There's a stitching process that has to happen to integrate all of the different lenses once they acquire the photography, and that attempts to be algorithmic, but it still involves a little hands-on massaging to get things to where they work without seams and stereo pairs, and we're experiencing that as we develop the content. But it keeps getting better and better.
But how was the Jaunt experience for you? Would you use it again?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a great off-the-shelf system for creating compelling, high-resolution virtual reality live-action content.
You touched on in your speech. Was there an endorsement deal that went on there? Do you have a piece of the company? You have to disclose.
I do.
I did not know that. Do you? You've talked about the various parts of this marketplace that need to come together, but I'm curious.
That's gonna be me.
Okay. Is it on the equipment side of it, Jaunt, Beyond? How
Sure.
important is that stuff to develop to make this market happen?
Well, for live action, it's very important. You need a camera that works, and the more I know, Samsung's putting out a camera. I have high hopes. Right now, it's purely conceptual, but I'd like to see it. That's going to be critical to creating future live action content for virtual reality.
Any other questions? You, sir. Glasses.
Can you talk to us about what your editorial process is? In other words, you're sitting in an editor. How many monitors? How are you handling it?
I didn't edit it myself, but I got to watch all three directors work with their editors. It's they're using. I believe they're using Adobe Premiere to cut, and it's pretty. It's a single monitor. They cut using a headset, so their first passes as they're selecting, they're looking in 360 degrees, and then they massage it using an unwrapped image. So they're picking out little pieces here and there and bumping them together based on, you know, sort of a pace that uses kind of a warped flat image that tells them what they're actually looking at. It's not, you know, I guess it'd be great if it was in a room, but it's just a single monitor.
And I guess my question is actually an extension of that, because you mentioned that you were pleasantly surprised that edits were
Right.
possible in a
Yes.
what did you say, a fully serious live action.
Well, just that when you're looking around and you cut, you're standing on one part of a field and suddenly you're in another part of the field. It's not weird. You know, that was kind of an amazing thing for us to discover. But it isn't in a movie either. When you're, you know, in a house and now you're out of the house, you understand that when you're watching a movie.
Right, but in editing two-dimensional content, you can actually make sort of compositional choices about where you cut, and when you don't know where the viewer
Well, you
is
don't know
looking,
yeah, right. No,
cut.
it is a challenge. So things that are removed from your plate definitely make it more difficult. You know, you lose the ability to guide people through close-up and by changing focus. But I think, you know, it means you have to be more clever about how you use audio and color and composition to guide a viewer's attention.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, last but not least, Dale Carmen.